Hey. Oye. Orlando. Orlando. Hey, Orlando. Orlando.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Hold on, let me close the door. No, man, okay.
Hey, sorry about that, man. My computer gave me a little bit of trouble. So how are you doing?
I'm closing the door. Okay. Well, I'm doing fine, man. Just I had a long day. I couldn't sleep last night. Well, I could sleep, but I woke up at 3:20. So I've been up since 3:20 in the morning.
Wow.
So I got into work early so I can get out early. And, but yeah, I eat dinner y todo, pero the problem is que after I eat dinner, when I sat down to call you, I started getting like a stomach ache, so I had to go to the bathroom.
Oh, okay, no problem.
That's why I needed 10 minutes.
It's all right.
Pero ya todo bien.
That's good. Sometimes you gotta drop the deuces, and that helps.
Yeah, boy, that helps big time. Oye, ¿por fin qué de trabajo?
Oh, I'm waiting for those people to get the background check supposedly this week, sometime this week, but I'm going to be starting Monday, best case scenario. So, right. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. I mean, well, I guess it happens, so, yeah. I'm still looking for something else, in the meantime, so.
Well, yeah, I printed. I printed. Like I told you, I printed up to like page 200, and then I printed some more, but I left it at work, so I got only up to page 200.
Up to page 200, I think that's gonna be more than enough.
All right.
Page 200 is gonna take us to cost management, and we're still working on time management. Yeah, so no, you're fine. That's fine. So I wanted to confirm. So we did on the last process that we did was we did sequence activities, right? And we did estimate activity resources. We did that one. That was the last.
Yeah, that one we did. That's the last one we did.
Yeah, estimate activity resources. So we do 6.5. That's the one that we gotta work on. Yeah. So before we start, I know that you took some tests. So do you have any questions or anything? Have you seen anything that looks a little bit different besides the stuff that we haven't covered yet? But how do you feel about the test that you took today?
No, I feel better. I think little by little. I took the same test I took the other day, so I can compare. But I didn't remember really most of the questions. I mean, I some of them were familiar, but I didn't know what the right answer was. So it's like taking it again. But I can compare it to see what I've learned from the last time I took it. And I got it 13 more than I did last time.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
And then I was looking at the ones I got wrong, and the majority of them were stuff that we haven't covered yet.
Okay, that's good. That's a good thing.
But
so you see, it's a learning curve, man. I mean, it's a learning curve. We cover here the processes and but what's really going to get you sharp for the test is taking practice tests, because those questions are very similar. They're not the same because no one has access to that database that they have for the PMI test. They're very jealous with that. No one really knows how they grade the test, and no one really knows exactly. And of course, the questions. They're very jealous with the questions. But I can tell you from my own experience that when I took it, that those questions are very similar. They're going to get you ready. And once you start hitting 80% consistently, then you're ready. You're ready for a test. Okay, so we did 6.5. No, we're going to do 6.5 now. So we did estimate activity resources. So now we're going to start with estimating activity durations. I mean, I'm sure that this is something that you love to do with your project team. And this is a fun one. So we know that the resources that we need. Now we have to estimate the task durations or the activity durations. So this is pretty much when you estimate the number of work periods. And when they say work periods, they mean either hours or days. I mean, whichever work period you use. That's based on the organization and the PMO standard that you have for your organization. So whether it's hours or days or both. I've done it with both on the same project plan. So you start estimating the number of work periods needed to complete the individual tasks with the resources that you already estimated in the previous process. So basically, what is the main benefit that you get out of this is that you will know how long it takes to complete each task. And this is going to be an input to the develop schedule process. So you can go ahead and start working on your schedule. The inputs that we're going to use for this process, the first one is the approach, the schedule management plan, the schedule approach. Then the list of activities, then the activity attributes, then the activity resource requirements, resource calendars, project scope statement, the list of risks or risk register, the RBS, the resource breakdown structure, and then the enterprise environmental factors and the organizational process assets. Those are the inputs that we're going to be using. The tools and techniques. The first one is expertise, expert judgment. I mean, your team probably has worked on, some of your team members have worked on something similar, so they can provide their experience in regards to how long it's going to take to complete that particular task. It's very common. Then another tool that you use is analogous estimating. So this is pretty much using a similar project or a similar task from another project in which you can use that, you can compare and use that those parameters from the previous project, and it'll give you a really good idea in regards to how long it's going to take in order to complete this task. And it's not only when you do the analogous estimating, it's also for not only for the duration but also for the cost. So you can get a lot of information for how much. So the cost associated with a task and the duration associated with that task. So this is really. It's really useful. One of the advantages that you have with analogous estimating is that it's very cost effective. It's very cost effective, and it's not going to take that much time to complete it. So those are the pros. But there's a major con, which is that it's not accurate. So that's something to keep in mind. And I remember something coming up in the test in regards to that. So those are the two advantages that you have with analogous estimating. It's quick, it's cheap, but it's not accurate. Okay. So, and you also, well, they tell you here, you gotta be careful, when the activities are actually similar in fact, that's when it's a little bit more reliable, and it's not just in appearance. So that's and also it works under the assumption that the team members have the right level of expertise. Then there is another estimating technique that is a parametric estimating. This is basically using an algorithm to calculate the cost and the duration based on historical data and project parameters. So this is definitely more accurate than analogous estimating. So it uses this is applying statistics basically, and you have a lot of data that you're going to be reviewing and using for your estimation. So this is a quantitative technique that basically you can determine the activity duration by multiplying the quantity of work to be performed by labor hours per unit of work. So I'm going to give you an example here. Activity duration on a design project is estimated by the number of drawings multiplied by the number of labor hours per drawing, or on a cable installation, the meters of cable multiplied by the number of labor hours per meter. For example, if this design resource is capable of installing 25 meters of cable per hour, then the duration required to install 1,000 meters is 40 hours. 40, that'll be 1,000 meters, which is the requirement, divided by 25 meters per hour. That's going to give you that's how you get your 40 hours. This technique can produce higher level of accuracy compared to the analogous estimation, but it's going to be as good as the data that is built into the model. So I'm sure you're very familiar with that. As if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So it's only as good as the data that you have built into the model. Parametric time estimates can be applied to a total project. Can be applied to the whole project or two portions of the project, and in conjunction, it can be used in conjunction with other estimating methods. So you're not really using just one. So the next one is what they call a 3-point estimating, and this I'm gonna want to take some time here because there's some questions that are going to be touching this. So this is basically it's a single point activity duration estimate that uses three different scenarios to do the calculation. So you have the most likely estimate or scenario for the estimate. So this estimate is based on the duration of the activity given the resources likely to be assigned, the productivity, and realistic expectations. This is the most likely scenario. Then the optimistic is the base case scenario, is the activity duration based on analysis of the best case scenario of the activity. And then the pessimistic, the activity duration based on analysis of the worst case scenario of the activity. So you have your most likely, the TM, then you're optimistic, and then you're pessimistic. So the way you calculate your estimate, and you have two formulas. These are the most common formulas, at least. The first one is the triangular distribution. So basically what you do is you add your most likely scenario plus your optimistic plus your pessimistic, and then you divide that by 3. So that's your triangular distribution. But the beta distribution, which comes from the PERT technique, which is program evaluation and review technique, that's PERT. It's a little bit different. So it's a variation. So and this is the one that really you're going to see in the test a little bit more. It's basically you add your optimistic scenario plus 4 times your most likely scenario plus your pessimistic scenario divided by 6. All of that divided by 6. So that's your beta distribution. So if you want to highlight those formulas and keep an eye on them, especially the beta distribution, that because that might come up in the test. You want to know that formula. So that will be the one. So it's the optimistic scenario plus 4 times the most likely scenario plus the pessimistic scenario divided by 6. So that will be the 3-point estimating. Now we have the group decision making technique. This is again when you use the brainstorming, Delphi technique, or nominal groups, or just basically get the groups engaged to provide in actually to improve the estimate accuracy and also the commitment to the estimates that are provided by the group. So it's also not only you want to improve not only the accuracy but also the commitment of the group to those estimates that are being provided. Um, so basically, this is very common. You get the group of people that are going to be working on the technical portion of the work, and in the estimation process, they're the ones that are going to be doing the work. They should be able to provide the estimates. So when you get and this is, I think, this helps when you have the people that are going to be working on the actual task involved in the process of estimation. Then the commitment, usually the commitment level increases. So, and the estimates are actually more accurate. A quick question. That doesn't it happen to you that some people take an estimate or they forget what an estimate is? It's just that it's not set in stone. It's an estimate is just as good as an estimate.
Yeah, the estimate is a guess, but you know, I've used a variety of these techniques. You know, I haven't really used the 3-point estimating when it comes to like the beta distribution or the triangular distribution.
Okay.
What we used at times was what's the pessimistic and the optimistic, and then we divide it by 2. Pero what this doesn't take into account is when you know who the developers are. See, this is estimating, but you know who can handle the workload better than others. Who's more senior? Who's more junior? So it's not just estimating the work, but it's the assignment of the work.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Entonces, so we've used it. We've used group decision making where I had like 3 tech leads and the architect on a call with me, or the architect, me, and a tech lead, and we would estimate what the work we were going to assign to that tech lead's team. Entonces, you know, we would take the tech lead's feedback on can they handle that work or not, even though we had an idea of the team. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So we would estimate it también based on who we were going to assign to.
No, that's even more accurate. Yeah, the level of expertise of the team.
Complexity of what you're assigning.
Yeah,
that's the other.
But I think the point that they're trying to make here is that's a very valid input. But the point that they're trying to make here is not that it's not just one tool. You know, it should be
a variety of them. Yeah. I've used parametric before. You know, it depends. It depends on, you know.
Yes. It's really
the developer, so I had to estimate my own stuff.
Yeah. And also, yeah, it's a group. But the point I'm trying to make, it should be a group of. It's not just one. It should be several techniques that you should use for the estimation.
Right.
It's a very challenging process. You know, this is really because once a date comes out, I mean, you know, the business wants to hold you accountable, and that's forever hold your peace. You know, that's the once you give out a date, that's it. That's
right. So, for example, when I was at Chase as a developer consultant, they gave me a shitload of tasks, right? Entonces they were already estimated, and what I did was I grouped them by similarity, and then I did one, and then I knew after I did one, I knew based on the similarity, which is historical, if I would meet the estimate that they had done or not, or should I tell them that the estimate was at risk, right? Because I didn't do the estimate. Entonces, I was able to finish everything early, as a matter of fact, like 2.5 weeks early. And that was because I used that technique as a developer, not a PM, on organizing my work. Now, as a PM, I've estimated it is similar. Like, oh, this stuff, we've done it before. And the developer that we're going to assign it to, or the team, has familiarity with this. How long did it take last time? This much. We should have some knowledge, right? Some experience now. We should be able to use an optimistic estimate, not too optimistic, but an optimistic estimate, and we would, estimate it accordingly. But anyway, yeah, but you're right. It's not one technique. You use
Correct.
a variety of them.
Should be a variety of them. The next one is it's also important. I think it's the reserve analysis. They usually you include contingency reserves, and you can call it time reserves or buffers. I mean,
everybody does it.
What's that?
Everybody does it.
Yeah, well, everybody should. You should have your contingency, not only for the cost. Probably that's where most people do it, only in regards to the cost. But this is also for the time.
Time is money.
What's that?
Time is money.
Time is money. Yes, and also this takes into account this has to be estimated within the schedule baseline. So this is going to be tied up to something that we haven't touched yet, but definitely it makes perfect sense. So the risks that have been identified, so that's where you have your contingency reserve to manage those risks that have been identified, that if they materialize and become issues, then you have your contingency reserve to be able to deal with those. So the contingency reserves are associated. That's why they say here, the contingency reserves are associated with the known unknowns. So you're ready for the ones that you have. Your contingency reserve, so it's associated with the risks that you have been identified, and if they materialize and become issues, and we'll cover that in detail later. Then you have. That's how you're able to. That's how you prepare for them. If they materialize, then you have your contingency reserve that will allow you to work on those issues. It's usually a percentage, and that's how we at least that's what I've seen, and or it can actually be developed using something a little bit more sophisticated, which I have never seen, but it's done that way. It's the Monte Carlo simulation. It's a very complex simulation that you have to run. It's very accurate, but it's very complex and very expensive. I have never seen it used in real life, but it's something that exists. It's the Monte Carlo simulation. The contingency reserves can be separated from the individual tasks and should be aggregated into buffers, or can be aggregated into buffers. As more precise information about the project becomes, the contingency reserve, you know if you're going to be using that or not, or you can just eliminate it. If something, as your level of uncertainty decreases and you progress in the project, then you might have to either use it, reduce it, or eliminate it. And for that, I'm sure each organization, that this is tied up to the process that you know very well, for SOX and all of that, how you handle that reserve, and if you need to use it, you have to go through an approval process, and it can be very cumbersome. So, but each organization has its procedures in place to deal with that. Okay. Estimates may also be produced for the amount of management reserve that is used for the project. So the management reserve It's different. And I want to make this point really clear here. We have two types of reserves. We have the contingency reserves that are going to be associated with the known unknowns, and those are basically the risks that we were able to identify and that we accepted. Acceptance, and we're gonna cover that in detail, but acceptance is a response. It's a way of responding to a risk. Usually it's a low probability, low impact or medium impact, low probability or medium probability of occurring. So those are the ones that we can live with. But if they materialize, then we have our contingency reserve that is gonna allow us to deal with them. So basically, it's usually time and money. Okay. Now, on the other hand, we have what is called management reserves. Management reserves are different from contingency reserves because management reserves are intended to address the unknown unknowns. So those risks that we were not able to identify, but the fact that we were not able to identify them doesn't mean that they don't exist. So you have to be prepared even for the unknowns just in case something materializes that you didn't account for, then you have some buffer in place to be ready for that occurrence. So that's something that I wanted to make really clear. So contingency reserves, known unknowns, the risks that we were able to identify. Management reserve is to deal with the unknown unknowns. So something that we didn't account for, a risk that we didn't account for, we don't have a response in place, but it can actually happen. So that's how we prepare for that. Okay, and again, it's just a percentage that you might have. I have seen in real life that it's usually the contingency reserve. That's the one that you have in place. I haven't really seen management reserve, but it's also applied. I don't know what your experience is with that.
Yeah, I've seen management reserves. I mean, but management, it depends on which management level. But I've seen managers say, I saw that right here at the bank. One of the business sponsors, he did a reserve by putting in, like a bogus, like what he did was he hid the reserve within an estimate higher than what he knew was going to be. And he covered, that's how he hid the reserve. But I mean, I've seen managers say we're putting a reserve and called it that on the project, and I've done it as a PM when I did estimates in time.
Yeah, but in this case, remember, and if you want to make a note of that, when you see contingency reserve, that's what you use to deal with the known unknowns, the known risks, the risks that were identified, and you have them in your risk register. And then the management reserve is the reserves that you use to address the unknown unknowns, and that means the risks that were not identified, but could actually arise in the project. So that's those two different things, and that's what I want you to keep in mind in this particular point, because this is going to come up, definitely going to come up in a scenario. And when they say management reserve, what they mean is the reserve that is going to address the unknown unknowns or the risks that were not identified. Got it?
Got it.
Cool. All right. So those are the tools that we use. Then the output that we get is the actual duration estimates, which are actually quantitative assessments of how long it's going to take to complete the specific task or activity. These estimates don't include any lags. They're really, well, they can include a range. For example, it could be something like 2 weeks, plus minus 2 days. So
Okay, I've never seen that.
you never seen that?
No, wait, what, two estimates for something?
No, no, it's a range. The 2 weeks, two plus minus days. So the activity, this is the
That's
two
two, huh?
weeks is 10 days, right?
Yeah, what did you just say, 12 days?
No,
That's right.
no, 2 weeks, two plus minus 2 days.
Yeah, so
So that's either 8 days,
how,
two
how,
2 weeks is 10 days, right?
yeah,
So it's at least 8 days and no more than 12. Yeah.
yeah, but how can you
You
manage?
never seen that before? I've seen it.
No,
Yeah.
so I can, you you can't do that. Well, I don't know. I mean, you can, but how are you going to know what your goal light date is if that's how you estimate? Let's say you estimate that way.
My when I see stuff like this, what I always do is I go with the longest. I go with the worst
That's
case
what I
scenario.
mean. That's why to me it doesn't make sense. I would just estimate 12
Yeah,
hours, 12 days.
yeah. You see, well, yeah, but I've seen this. I don't use this, but I've seen it though.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks, yeah, 10 days plus 2 days. That's what I will do. I will do 12 days for if it was me. I always go with a. I'd rather have those 2 extra days than not have anything. And then the probability, and then 15% probability exceeding 3 weeks, which indicates a high probability that the activity will take 3 weeks or less. Yeah, that I try to. I'll try to get the percentage. Of course, it's the level of confidence basically from the estimate. But I've seen that. And I get your point. Absolutely. As a PM, definitely you should go with the 12 days and not with the 8 days. I mean, that doesn't really make that much sense. But I've seen it though. Uh, Project document updates. Yes, there might be some documentation that needs to be updated, activity attributes, and any assumptions during the activity duration estimate, um, such as skill levels and availability. So some of the points that you were bringing up in regards to your staff. So that definitely has an impact. So once we have all of that, we have the duration of the activities. We have the list of activities. We created the sequence. We now measure the durations. Now we move on to the next to the next item, which is develop the schedule. This is we're going to take a little time here. Um, this is key. So basically, this is where we put everything together. We start analyzing the activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints, and then we create a project schedule, basically. Um, so the key benefit of this is that once we enter this information in regards to the scheduled activities, durations, resources, availabilities, and the logical relationships or sequence into a scheduling tool, then we can have the scheduling tool that we use is going to generate a model with the planned dates for completing the project activities. So basically, we'll have our schedule in place. Okay, so this is also an important item to keep in mind. Developing a project schedule, as you know, and that has been my experience as well, is it's you have to go through several iterations. It's an iterative process.
Right.
You'll have to you start your schedule model is used to determine your planned start and finish dates for project activities or tasks, and then also for your milestones based on the accuracy of the inputs that you have. It can require, and it will require, I would say, the review and revision of duration estimates and resource estimates to come up in order to create the schedule model to establish an approved project schedule that will serve as a baseline. This is uh, this is gonna serve as a baseline so you can track project progress. Once you have your start and finish activity dates, then it is common to have project staff assigned to activities, review their assigned activities, and confirm that the start and finish dates do not present a conflict with their resource calendars or any assigned tasks or activities that they might have in um, other projects. And also, as work progresses, revising, reviewing, and maintaining the project schedule, it's important in order to have a realistic schedule throughout the duration of the project. So that's common. That's very common, straightforward stuff. So what are the inputs that we have? The first one, obviously, is the approach, the schedule management plan, the approach for the schedule. Then the list of activities, activity attributes, the project schedule network diagrams that is going to contain the logical relationships, the activity resource requirements, basically identify the types and quantities of resources that are needed, the resource calendars, so you know the availability of the resources that you have working in the project, activity duration estimates, so you know the duration, because you have a quantitative assessment, so most likely how long it's going to take to complete the activities of the project. Then your project scope statement, your list of risks with the risk register, your project staff assignments, which is basically specifies who's going to be working on each activity. Then your resource breakdown structure. And last but not least, you have your enterprise environmental factors and your organizational process assets. So this is where we start applying some of the techniques. So for the purposes, the first technique that we have to use in developing the schedule is schedule network analysis. So basically, this is a technique that generates the project schedule model, and it employs several techniques. The first one is the critical path method, the critical chain method, what if analysis, and resource optimization techniques to calculate early and late start and finish dates for the uncompleted portions of the project tasks. So the first one that we're gonna be covering is the critical path method. So the critical path, when you have the duration of the activity, now this is something that I wanna take some time here. Do you want to take a 10-minute break?
Yeah, let me get some water, man.
Okay. So let's do a 9:04.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I'll be right back.
You okay?
Yeah.
You want to hear something cute Stella did?
Oh yeah, I'm here by the way.
I'm here too. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you. So
Oh, okay.
just letting you know.
All righty. So what we're going to work on is on the critical path method. And to do this, would you happen to have pen and paper?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's start with the on page 177. I hope you have that one printed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with that example. So we're gonna do, so basically the critical path is the shortest time that it's gonna take you. Is the longest path, and it's gonna be the shortest time that it's gonna take you to complete the project, basically. So you have, now that you have your activities, right? If you look at figure 6-18, you look at your activities. Activities are going to be A, B, C, and D, and you have your, well, you can look at the legend. So those are the activity nodes, and then you have your there's going to be a duration associated with that. Forget just the duration is the, I usually put it on. They put it here. The total float. There are different ways of doing this. I don't do it exactly like they have it here. I usually put the duration under the letter of the letter of the activity. So under A, I put the duration. In this case, they're putting it on top. I mean, you can do it like that too, but I'd rather do it, and I'll show you why. So let's see. It's A, B, C, and D, and always it's going to start with, you have to put start, and then that goes to activity A, B, C, and D, and then finish. Kind of have to close the cycle. So the way it's easier to see it is under the letter that identifies the activity, I put the duration. You can put the duration there. So for activity A, based on this information, the duration is 5. It could be 5 days, it could be 5 hours. So that's something that you gotta define, the work period. So, and then for B, the duration is 5 as well. Then for C, the duration is 10. And then for D, the duration is 15. So those are values that you're gonna be given. They'll provide you that information. The how many activities, and then how many activities, and then the duration of the activities. You need that at least. So now, this is when you start calculating with the critical path. So always a rule. Even though then again the pin book starts here with a 1, you start with duration 0. Even though they say here that the project started on day 1, but usually it's easier to visualize it with a start on day 0. So you start. Oh, and I want to see. Unfortunately, I was trying to. I'm working for something that was easier. But let me send you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me put it together first, really quick, and so you can see what I have. We're gonna do the same example in there. I just want you to see it, and then we can do more.
I don't know what the point we're getting to here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't know what's the point that we're getting to with this exercise.
Well, to know how to calculate manually calculate the critical path.
Okay.
That's the point. Of course, this is done by the software, by the project management software. but for some scenario questions, you need to know how to calculate it. Have you ever done it? Manually calculate the critical path?
Yeah, but okay. The critical path to me is your project time. Your project.
Well, the critical path is, by definition, is the longest path and it's the shortest time that it's going to take you to complete the project. And it also shows the activities that basically cannot be delayed. So if there's a delay on any of those activities that are part of the critical path, your timeline is going to be delayed, and therefore your project is going to be late. So that's the benefit of using the critical path. So if you know which activities are part of the critical path or which tasks are part of the critical path, you make sure that those are the activities that you cannot really cannot be delayed, because otherwise your project is going to be late.
Yeah, I mean, what it's basically saying is that you can develop B and C at the same time.
We'll see. Let's
the critical path is things that. Well, anyway, go ahead. I'll
yeah. So let's, because I want you to understand the principle, but let me do something.
Are you sending me something?
I might send you because I can't find the file, but I'm gonna send you a text with a picture. Maybe that's quicker. And I apologize for that. I'll send you some other exercises that we can do, but I really want you to have this part clear, because there might be a question that comes up with this, and I want you to understand it the easiest way possible. Once we do a couple of exercises, you'll see that it's not really that complicated. So I'm going to send you a picture. Well, basically, this is the same diagram that we have in the pin book. We're going to do the whole thing. The forward pass, the backward pass. We're going to calculate the float, and then we're going to calculate the critical path. My file got corrupt. I had a graphic that I wanted to send you, but it's not working. Let me know when you get I just sent you a text. Did you get my text?
Nope. Oh, I guess it just came out right now.
Okay.
Tremendo dibujo que tiene aquí. All right.
Okay. So that's what we have on the pin book, right? So what I did is, for me, it's easier to put the duration under the letter. So A, B, C, and D, right? So the duration is, but based on the pin book, if you look at the key that they give you, the duration, they put it on top, but I put it in the bottom, and you'll see why. I mean, at least for me, it's going to be easier to visualize. So the way I found that it's easier is to start with duration, to start on day 0. They start with day 1, but usually it starts with day 0, and you also see why. So if you put a 0 on top of we're on activity A, I don't know if you can draw the same.
Just don't worry about it. I have followed you.
Okay. So we put activity on activity A. We start on day 0, and then 0 plus 5. That's gonna give us the early finish. So it will be 0 plus 5. That's gonna be. Let me look for the. Just a second. Yeah, that's gonna give us the early finish. So that's gonna be 5. So it's 0 plus 5. That's 5 in the upper, like they have it in the upper right hand corner. So it's instead of what I'm doing is 0 plus 5. That'll be 5, and then that 5 in this case is gonna be the early start. So A, we're doing what is called a forward pass. So that early start, I'm sorry, that early finish for A is gonna become the early start for B and C, because if you're following the arrows. So B is gonna start. The early start for B is gonna be, in this case, 5. They're using 6 because they're starting on day 1, but we're starting on day 0. So that's why you see a 6 on theirs and then a 5 on ours. So then you do the same thing. So 5 plus 5 on B, we're in activity B now. 5 plus 5 is 10. So 10 is the early finish for activity B. And then 5 plus, and activity C, 5 plus 10 is 15, and that's going to be the early finish for activity C. So if you look at activity D, we have 2 different early finish. So since we're doing the forward pass, we take the highest value. So it's not, we have 10 or 15. We're going to take the 15 because it's the higher value that you got to take. That's the rule. So we put 15, and then 15 plus 15 on activity D, that'll be 30. So 30 is the early finish for D. So we have that, and then we are gonna be doing the actual
I think you left a big thing out of your explanation, but I understand that you have to look at it, the non-critical path, your early start is 10 plus 6.
Yes, 10 plus 6 on
D.
On D.
So you can finish B on the 10th day, but you won't finish the flow for B until the 30th. Same time.
You see, that's a good point. So if you see something really quick, B has a float. So B, if it has a float, it's not part of the critical path. If you have a float on the activity, it's not part of the critical path. So if you look at
flow, because you're dependent on D starting, and based on your critical path, D won't start until C finishes. Or is it just because I have a float? Let's say, for argument's sake, B doesn't have a float.
Then it's part of the critical path.
Right.
And in some cases, I've seen it, it's not ideal, but let's say in this case that if you have more activities, then you can have 2 critical paths. I mean it's not, it should not be the case. But if B didn't have a float, then it would not be. If B didn't have a float, it will be part of the critical path. So if you look at A, C, and D, there's no flow. So if it doesn't have a float, then there's no there is no so that's well that's what we were doing. But I really wanted to finish the exercise so you could see then what we did is the forward pass, and this is where then you got to do a backward pass. You start with the 30, which is the early finish for D, then 30 minus the early start. It's 30 minus 15 is 15. So the late start for D is going to become the late start for B and C. It's going to be 15 for both. And then you have to subtract 15 minus the early start, in this case 50 for B. 15 minus 5 is 10. And then for C is 15 minus 5. No, wait a second, it's the duration, I'm sorry. 15 minus 10, the duration, so it's 5. And then you're going back to A, doing the backward pass. You have a late start for B is 10. In the graphic, it shows 11 because they start on day 1. Well, the way I'm doing it is 10 because I start on day 0. So 10, and then I have 5 for C. They have 6 because they start on day 1. So when you're doing the backward pass, it's the lowest number. So in this case, it will be a 5 minus 5 for the duration. That will be 0. So then you subtract the two values. On 10, you have on B, you have a float. On 5 minus 5 is 0. On A, you don't have any float. On C, you don't have any float. On D, you don't have any float. So the activities that you don't have any, and if you look, there are two ways to look at it. If you look at the path in which the activities don't have any flow, those are part of the critical path. Really quick, you can see that. But then you can do the actual. You can add the duration of the different paths. If you have A, if you look at A plus B plus D, so that's A is 5 days. Let's say that it's days. So A, you have 5 days plus 5 days for B. That's 10 days, right? Plus 15 for D, that's 25 days. But then you have the other path, which is ACD. That's 5 days for A, 10 days for C, that's 15 days, plus 15 days for D, that's 30 days. So that really quick shows you which one is the critical path, which is the longest path. And again, it's the longest path, and it's that's the shortest time that it's going to take you to complete that project. In this case, let's say that we're talking about days, then the shortest time that it's going to take you to complete this project is 30 days. I don't know if you follow me.
Yeah, I mean, I lost you somewhere along the way, but I understand. It's
Okay.
just that this thing, and again, I haven't read it, pero esta cosa, it's just the critical path is the longest.
It's the longest path, yes.
Yeah,
The longest duration.
But I mean, this example is bad because it doesn't take into consideration the number of resources that you have, or the flow.
No, not yet. I mean, this is only to see which activities in which you have. The thing is that this is like the This is one part, one tool, so you can just identify which activities are part of the critical path. That's it. Then you're going to do some analysis. So you can do what is called resource optimization. You're going to do that later. Once you know the activities are part of the critical path, then you can apply other techniques that are going to include the resources. So basically, this is just to know this is part A of the analysis. It doesn't take into consideration the resources that you have. That is true, but this is just to know which one is the critical path. So then we can apply optimization tools that will allow you to optimize your schedule. But we do that later. We just want to know right now which one is a critical path. That's it.
This is frustrating. Okay. Esto de trabajo, pero okay.
What's that?
This is a waste of time. The critical path. The critical path for us was always determining for example, en el banco que yo estaba, en el trabajo que estaba antes, the critical path was identifying the steps that it took to finalize the end-to-end process. And in those steps, we took into consideration the longest duration and the next part of the process. You see what I'm saying? So if we take a look at the example you have, you would say A is dependent on the completion of C, or C is dependent on the completion of A,
Yes.
and B is dependent on the completion of C. Now B is also within the path, but B is less development time. So this will mean a process flow or a end-to-end test could be A, B, D, or A, C, D. So
Correct.
The critical path is A, C, D, because that's the longest it'll take you for you to develop.
Correct.
And those are the steps in the path. And so what we would do is we would do that. We would say, okay, what is the steps on the flow? And that's how we define the critical path. So if we knew that there was a flow that was similar, like multiple flows that were similar, we would take each component and create the critical path, which is the longest development of each component within that flow. And then we assign things depending on, different factors. Pero we always knew that we could be developing 20 different components of the flow, but there could be only 8 that were associated with the critical path. The other ones were less in duration within the path. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like okay, processing a payment through a DDA account. There's a lot of components that are going to be the same as processing a payment through a checking account. Right? It's just that there's components that are different. One comes from one system, another comes from another system, and maybe the accounting goes to a different thing. But other than that, there's a lot of similarity. So then we would take the critical path and see what that process is, and we knew this is what took us the longest to develop, but we could knock both flows out at the same time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's the same principle. But when you get activities like B, when you calculate the float of B, it gives you 5. Let's say that it's days. It's 5 days. Then you can delay B for 5 days and not be late, and then maybe use that to shorten the time of the activities that are part of the critical path. Maybe for C or D in this case. So that's kind of what the analysis will tell you. You have a float of 5 days on B, then you can use those 5 days to optimize D, for example, and that way optimize your schedule. And instead of 30 days, it will take you 25 days. That's basically what it.
That's the other part. Yeah, that was the other part that I was going to get into. One technique is how we estimated it.
Mm-hmm.
The other technique is how we developed it. we were trying to develop, try to knock out, it's the way you assigned it. The way we would estimate it was critical path.
Yeah.
The way we developed it was A, B, D, where we could assign A and C to one developer and B and D to another.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what you're doing is your duration is 30 days. Your development is 20. 5 days for B, 15 days for D. Because you should be able to finish A and C within 15 days. See what I'm saying?
Correct, yeah.
Right. But anyway, it's okay. So critical path is getting the longest duration. Breaking it down, getting the longest duration.
Yep.
So if B did not have a floating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not have a whatever, not floating.
A float, yeah, a float. Mm-hmm.
Then it will be A, B, C, D, and the duration of the critical path would have been 35.
Correct. Yeah. And in some cases, in some diagrams, I've seen it that not common, but you might have more than one critical path. Ideally, you don't, because there's something kind of iffy in there. But it can happen. It can happen. So, yeah, that's with the critical path. If you want to work on it a little bit more, let me know. We can do it once we finish the resources. Then we can dedicate some time just specific for that.
No, that's fine. Maybe we review it somewhere down the line.
Yes, we'll take once we finish the processes. I'll make a note because I want you to see a whole exercise with more activities. So once you do it a couple of times, you'll get it. So it's really simple. So do the calculation. I'll send you. Probably what I'll do is I send you the day during the day an exercise so you can print it, and then we can work out of that and then do it together, and so you can see it. Once you do it a couple of times, you'll get it. I mean, you'll get it in 15 minutes. But I'll send you a printout so you can have it. Then another technique is called the critical chain method. So this is basically where you put buffers on the project schedule to account for limited resources and project uncertainties. It's very similar to the critical path, but it has but this one, it's a little bit more sophisticated because it takes into account the effects of resource allocation, resource optimization, resource leveling, and activity duration uncertainty. So this is a little bit more accurate and takes into account other variables that were not taken into account in the regular critical path method. It allows you to do some buffer management to give you. It uses activity with durations that do not include safety margins, logical relations as resource availability, with some statistically determined buffers that will allow you to calculate the critical path. The resource constrained critical path is known as the critical chain. These buffers are non-work schedule activities that are actually used to manage uncertainty. It's added at the end of the critical chain and is known as a project buffer. So that way it will allow you to protect the finish date, your target finish date from slippage. You might have additional buffers known as fitting buffers, and they are placed at each point where a change of dependent activities that are not part of the critical chain fits into the critical chain. So you see a representation here The critical chain is at the middle, so it'll be C, D, E, F, then project buffer, and then finish. The project buffer of figure 6-19, that project buffer is to protect the critical path um, and your target date, your finish date.
Cover your ass is what it is.
Huh?
It's to cover your ass.
Yes, this is a glorified way of, or a glorified way of doing some sandbagging, I guess.
Yeah.
That's all that is. Mm-hmm. But there's some that's basically what you're doing. You don't want that to so you add a buffer and then you protect the target date. So that's exactly what it is. So then you have another technique. It's resource optimization. So this is where you start optimizing you can optimize your schedule. So the first one is resource leveling. So this is where start dates and finish dates are adjusted based on your resource constraints. And the goal is to balance your resources with in regards to the available supply. So these can be used when shared or critically required resources are only available at certain times or in limited quantities, or when such resources are over allocated. Your goal is to keep resource usage at a constant level, and in some cases, resource leveling can actually cause the original critical path to change, usually to increase. So you have your activities. They give you an example here. So you have your start, then you have your activity A. You have Tom and Sue for 8 hours each for activity A, and then for activity B, you have Sue for 8 hours. So day one, you have Tom working 8 hours, and then Sue working 16 hours, which is not really that's not really a good thing. I mean, you have her working 16 hours. I'm sure there are some cases that it can actually work like that, but normally that'll be 2 days, right?
Right.
So, and then you have on day two, you have Tom working for 8 hours on activity C. So that's before leveling. So then you apply the resource leveling, and then you basically have you're pushing activity B to day two. So basically, you have activity A, you have both of them, Tom and Sue working 8 hours. That's a day. That makes sense. And then you push activity B. So you have Sue, given the fact, assuming that she's available on day two to work on that for 8 hours. And then your activity C, you push it because it has to finish. Activity C is dependent on activity B to complete. So to be complete. So activity C is going to get pushed to day three. But basically, you're leveling your resources, and you have something that makes more sense. You have Tom and Sue working 8 hours on day one. Then on day two, you have activity B. You have Sue working for 8 hours. And then you have Tom again working on day three, 8 hours on activity C. So that's basically what is resource leveling. It's kind of giving it more a little bit more logic to
So let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Why isn't Tom working on day two 8 hours on activity C?
when they originally maybe is without when they did the reason for that, that's a great question. The reason for that is probably they did the critical path without taking into account the resources. To your point, they did just a raw critical path, and it came up with start activity A and B, and then activity C, an A and B on the first day, but they didn't take into account the resources. So that's why this actually starts to, this is when you got to look at it and take into account the resource constraints, and then apply some logic. Since that's what you do, the leveling. You're not going to have someone working um, 16 hours on a day. That
Yeah,
that
but
that
why,
is not.
why is the town doing activity C on day 2? So it's activity C is independent of activity B. And activity B is assigned to Sue. Activity C is assigned to Tom.
Yeah, but if you look at the arrow that it goes from, it goes to start, then activity A and activity C, activity B are requirements. They gotta be completed before you can go to activity C. Look at the arrows that you have.
Yeah,
Those are
okay.
the activity A and B are dependencies for C.
I'm thinking of some form of development, but I gotta remember this is project management of anything.
Yes.
So sometimes the other dependency that you gotta wait for something to finish before you can start something else.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, they're dependencies. I mean, both of them are dependencies, and they're just finish to start. So it'd be the dependency in that case. But then that's when you start applying the logics. I mean, you're not going to have someone working 16 hours a day. I mean, you could, but it's not really. It might be counterproductive. So ideally, what you level is, and you have them working the 8 hours, and it's going to push it a day.
Right.
But then that's leveling. Then resource moving, it's a little bit different. This is an adjustment that in when you apply the resource moving, your critical path is not going to change, and your completion date is not going to be delayed. When you do leveling, yes, the critical path usually is going to change, and most likely it's going to be longer. But when you apply resource moving, so you basically work with the resources, but your critical path is not going to change, and meaning that your delivery date is not going to change. So this is what you do, and this is where you work with the floats that you have. That's why you want to calculate the floats that you have for the different activities, and you use the float time, so you can apply. You can apply resource moving. That's the only way that your date is not gonna change, your delivery date. So that's the difference between resource leveling and resource moving. Okay. Your critical path is not going to change on resource moving. Then we have modeling techniques. In modeling techniques is when you use what if scenarios. So this is where you ask the key question: what is the situation represented by what if the situation represented by scenario X happens? So you start working on your network analysis of the different activities that are part of your schedule to measure the different scenarios. Like if a major component delivery is delayed, what's going to happen? So you start thinking about the scenarios so you can be ready for them, and have some sort of mechanism in place to avoid any delays on your delivery date. So that way you also keep your project schedule. You keep it honest, because you will be measuring some adverse conditions, and then you'll also be preparing some contingency and response plans that will help you to mitigate any unforeseen situations. So that's why it's useful to think to apply the what if scenario analysis. And then another technique is the simulation, which involves calculating multiple project durations with different sets of activity assumptions, and then using probability distributions from the 3-point estimates, like as we covered before. This is where one of the most common ones is the Monte Carlo simulation, the Monte Carlo analysis, and it will basically give you it will help you to calculate a distribution of possible outcomes for your project duration. Next thing that another technique is leads and lags. So these are refinements that are applied during your network analysis. The leads are they're tied up to you use basically during your network analysis to develop a realistic schedule, because it allows you to adjust the start time of the successor activities. So the leads are used in limited circumstances to advance the successor activity with respect to the predecessor. And lags are used in limited circumstances where processes require a set period of time to elapse between the predecessors and successors without work or resource impact. Basically try to keep everything flowing. So the resource leveling and resource smoothing are related to resources, and then you have some other techniques like schedule compression that will help you to shorten the schedule duration without reducing the project scope. Remember that I'm sure that you've been in this situation many times, that you're asked by your sponsor that can we shorten the schedule? Can we shorten the schedule? So this is one of the techniques that you can. This is where these are the techniques that will help you to accomplish that. One of the most common ones is crashing. Crashing is basically throwing more bodies at a task, and it's a technique to use to shorten the schedule duration for the least incremental cost by adding more resources. Examples of crashing include approving overtime, bringing in additional resources, or paying to expedite delivery to activities on the critical path. Crashing works only for activities on the critical path, where additional resources will shorten the activity's duration. Remember that the critical path is the longest path, right?
Right.
So if we can shorten that, and that's going to be the shortest time that it's going to take us to complete the project. So if we can shorten the critical path, then we might be able to shorten the duration, the overall duration of the project. The only thing is that in many cases, and this has been a battle that I have fought many times, crashing does not always produce a viable alternative and may result in increased risk and cost. That is very true, because even though a lot of people think that, hey, if we are painting a house, I mean, and we have 2 painters, that is, and for them it's going to take 8 hours to complete the house. If we get 2 more or 4 more, then it should take 4 hours or even 2 hours. So that's not always the case, because maybe the 2 or 4 that you're bringing, they're newbies. They don't know. They're not experienced painters. So there's a learning curve. They have to learn how to use the materials. They have to learn how to. They're not as fast as the painters that you hire to begin with. If you apply that to a software project, the same thing. I mean, you might bring more developers, but there's always going to be a learning curve. So throwing more bodies at the activities, not necessarily. I mean, it's going to work, but it doesn't work It's not going to work all the time. And
Okay,
that's
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Smarty Pants. What happens if they're giving you senior developers?
They give you all senior developers?
Yeah. So
Well,
you got a project, and you got right now 4 developers working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For some one reason or another, you know, your timeline is threatened, and you want to meet your timeline, and somebody comes and says, "I want to give you 4 senior guys, 4 guys as strong as what you have, or stronger."
But even if they're strong developers, there's always going to be a learning curve. They might not be familiar with the requirements. They might not be familiar with the project at all. There's always going to be a learning curve for them. It might not be probably won't take them a long time to be brought up to speed. But there's always going to be a learning curve in which they're going to try to understand the different components. They're going to try to understand the requirements. They're going to try to that's going to take some time. So that should be accounted for.
So what's the impact to your project? So if I tell you right now, you know, I'm putting you in a spot, but this is how I'm teaching you. If I'm telling you right now, hey, you have for development work, you got 2 months of development left, and we were supposed to finish it in a month. So I'm going to give you 4 more developers. You got 4. I'm going to give you 4 more developers to cut the development time. But you know, you got, or better yet, you got 4 months left, and we're supposed to finish it in the next 2.5 months. So it's critical for us to finish this. They don't want to move the project back, the go live back. So I'm giving you 4 developers. And you're estimating that's going to onboard these guys is going to take 2 months for them to get familiar. I mean, it's going to take 2 weeks for them to get familiar. What's your risk? If it's going to take 2 weeks for them to get familiar, right?
Yes.
That means that they should become productive
after 2 weeks.
After 2 weeks.
Yeah. And then what I would do is to try to do as much stuff in parallel as possible.
All right, but let me ask you a question. You got a development, you got a team. You know, your team is made up of many different resources, not just developers, right? You got BAs, you can have a tech lead, QA, different people. What's your risk by bringing in the 4 developers? If in 2 weeks they'll get up to speed, and that will give you a month worth of development, what's your risk? What are you not seeing? And what you're not seeing is when you bring more developers, but the supporting team stays the same, your supporting team now is thinned out.
Yeah.
And that creates an unknown risk to your project that you can't quantify. So what happens is if you have one BA, now that one BA has to work with 8 developers.
Yeah.
And now your tech lead has to manage 8 people.
8 people, yeah.
And now you as a PM have to manage a schedule that now is cut. So you have to re-plan, and you got to restructure your critical path. In other words, it causes other work for other areas. And that's where people make a mistake. They blind themselves that I'm cutting development time, but they don't see what the other impacts are.
Yeah, testing, yep.
Testing. And look, and I'm telling you from experience, okay? And I told management not to do this. I said, if you're going to bring me, 8 new developers or 6 new developers, I need another BA. So now I got to onboard not just new developers, but a new BA, which means now how to manage more people, which means now my workload has increased, which means what am I going to cut? I either have to work 12 hours a day, 10 hours a day, or I'm going to have to make myself not available. And it's a ripple effect. It's like if you throw a rock in a puddle, and the waves just go out and out and out. So you have to be very, very keep that in mind, man. You got to be very, very critical on this crashing.
Yeah.
The only time that works is if you've been, if you've got a project that you've been developing for a while and you already have planned that certain resources were going to be offboarded, taken off the project at a certain time, and you see that you need those resources, and those resources then are left on the project. In other words, they're not bringing them in; they're just keeping them longer. Then you already have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind when you're.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's right.
They don't teach you that in this freaking book.
Anyway. That's very true. That's very true.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, but that's great. But it's so easy. I mean, I see VPs and executives. No, let's throw more bodies at it. I mean, that we can cut the, and then these discussions. I mean, one time I had a big. It kind of turned out into an argument. I had this. He was a C-level executive. The guy adding more bodies. I mean, we have to. It's not that simple. And by me saying that, it turned out to be a whole turmoil with the guy, because he's like, well, why are you saying that? I mean, we have more people. And then I start explaining, I mean, it's not that simple. Not as simple as throwing more bodies at it. I mean, that's not always the best approach.
You know what the best approach sometimes is? It's redefine the deliverables and go live, and then have a second go live afterwards.
Yeah, a multi-phase.
Exactly. And
multi-phase approach. Yeah.
The business can work with a less functional version of what they need while you feed them the next, the final project. But anyway.
Yeah, that pretty much was what we ended up doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But then crashing is that, excuse me. And then fast tracking is basically when you are doing crashing is related to resources, and then fast tracking is a compression technique that is related to activities, to the tasks themselves. When you try to do as much as possible in parallel, for at least for a portion of the duration. So when they give you a couple of examples here, an example is constructing the foundation for a building before completing all of the architectural drawings. If fast tracking, there's also some risk associated with it. There might be some rework that needs to be done, and there might be some increased risk. But it only works if the activities can be overlapped to shorten the project duration. So fast tracking would be what we were saying. We brought this before. I think it's a better example. Writing the test scripts once the BRD is done, to have the business analyst work on writing the test scripts after the BRD is done. So that'll be you can overlap those two, and that way you might be able to shorten the project duration somewhat somehow. But that's a way of being to be fast tracking, at least with the business analyst. Another tool would be the scheduling tool. This is going to be the software that you use in Microsoft Project, Primavera, or the tool that you guys use at Bank United. I always forget the name.
Workfront.
Okay. And then what do you get? The output is the schedule baseline, which is an approved version of the schedule that is going to be only changed through a formal change control procedure. And this is going to be used for as a basis for you to compare to actual results. So it is accepted and approved by the appropriate stakeholders as the schedule baseline with baseline start dates and baseline finish dates. It's basically the approved version of the schedule. And then your actual project schedule. Um, that's the outputs from a schedule model or a schedule presentation. This is where you get your bar charts, your Gantt charts, your milestone charts, your project schedule network diagrams. So all the nice diagrams that you get showing the different activities. You also get schedule data, which is basically the resource. It includes the resource requirements by a time period. It's usually shown as a resource histogram. You get alternative schedules, such as best case or worst case, and not resource level, different flavors, and the scheduling of contingency reserves. Another output is the project calendars, which has the working days and shifts that are available for scheduled activities, and then some updates to some elements of the project plan, like the schedule baseline and the schedule management plan, might need to be updated. And then some of the documentation needs to be updated, might need to be updated, including the activity resource requirements, the activity attributes, the calendars, and also the list of risks. So the risk register. So that was a long one.
Yeah.
And I have, yeah, it's gonna be 10. So we only have one more missing. So would you be able to do tomorrow?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and you're going to Vegas this week, right?
Yeah, Friday morning. I mean.
On Friday morning. Okay, awesome.
But
So
on Thursday night, I gotta pack and do some shit. So
yeah,
we always do Tuesday, Wednesday. So
yeah, we only do Tuesday and Wednesdays. Yeah, no, that's fine.
hey, by the way, before you go,
Yeah,
just to give you a little bit of more background, when you are one of the techniques I used was the replacement of resources to more productive resources. So when you start seeing that your schedule is slipping, and somebody wants to throw more bodies, what you do is you say, I don't need more bodies, I need more senior bodies. So what we would do was we would onboard somebody. We used like a rough methodology. So we were at a certain point, we were doing development and bug fixing at the same time.
mm-hmm.
So when we were on board somebody, we would put them first to work. They would sit and get trained for a day or two with our architect. Our architect put them up to speed, and then or the tech lead, and then part of the training within that 1 or 2 days was that we would assign them support task. In other words, bugs, tickets.
Yeah.
And they will work with them to resolve the tickets, and then there would be, for the first week, they would only be doing bug fixing. And what that allowed them to do was to get familiarized with the project.
Yeah.
Before we started giving them new development. And the new development we give them was initially easy stuff, even though they were senior guys. So when we estimated that we could fully onboard somebody within a 2-week span. And what we would do was onboard a senior guy and replace somebody who was not cutting it. Because in the long run, that senior person, even after 2 weeks of training, was as productive as the non-senior person. And that meant that their productivity level was only going to increase through the time, and therefore positively affecting your development time. So that was a tactic that we used to use. And it actually worked out pretty good for us. for the most part.
So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep that in mind that when you're doing all this stuff, there's different things that you can and a lot of it is meeting with your senior tech lead or architect or developer to formulate a plan and involve that person in the process for onboarding in other words, have that person put together the onboarding plan. And so that's what I did. I involved the architect and the tech leads. And we had an onboarding plan that would work. In fact, other projects started looking at how we would onboard people because they saw that it was effective. But that's different from saying, hey, I'm going to give you, 5 more guys. Although that happens sometimes, I always made sure that the guys that were going to give me had already similar experience to what we were assigning to them. So the onboarding was less time. You know what I mean? And then we would have to absorb because then what would happen was the tech leads our tech leads would do 50% of the time was development, 50% was managing the developers, and part of that was they would oversee, answer questions, and then when somebody would finish development and they would do unit testing, the tech lead would verify that what they developed was working. And what happened was that the more people we brought on board, we quickly noticed that the tech leads would less and less have time to develop or eventually support people because there was just too many people that would be involved in onboarding. So what we started doing was saying, okay, to the tech lead, get one of your senior guys and have him help you. And notice how this impacts, okay? This is what I was saying. It impacts other areas that you're not even looking. I said to the tech lead, okay, get a senior guy and give him, have him help you assign the work and follow up with 2 developers. So now you have a senior developer that was experienced in your30% of their work was supporting other people. So now you have them for 30% less. It's 30% of a senior guy that's been from day one on your project more productive than 100% of a new guy that just walked in. So you can see so what we would do is we would always, it was almost like a study and an analysis within a project. We would see how long it would normally take for somebody to be productive, where we can go back to a normal level. So in other words, the tech lead will have to support the guy less. Therefore, the tech lead could get back some of the work that they, gave to one of the senior developers to help them, and then have the senior developer concentrate more on development. That was the negative. The positive was that senior developers were being trained to be tech leads. And so they felt they had a career path. So they were motivated. But, when you got to meet a deadline, sometimes motivation is not your top priority,
Yeah, no.
So just
but the problem that I had was, and that specific case is that those executives were kind of shady. I mean, even though we had an approved, a signed off timeline of 6 months, they were offering the product in 4 months. So then they were over promising and making us setting us up for failure. Oh, and then coming up with BS. I say no. We trust you guys that you guys can do it in 4 months instead of 6, and we explain. I mean, this is you agreed on 6 months. We cannot. This is gonna be. Then we have to negotiate. Not everything is gonna be available in 6 months. I mean, some of the functionality may be delivered in 4 months, but not all of it. I mean, so then we started to.
Well, it's
yeah.
You gotta understand. Unfortunately, you're gonna run into that a lot. I ran into that with the example of telling you that we had development issues. The business underestimated the project and over promised. So they told to close the deal. They told the customer, yeah, we can do this and we can do that, and yeah, by the way, we can do this, and oh yeah, it's only going to take 8 months, and I left after being on that project for 3 years, and I found out this week they still haven't gone live. When I left, we were already at the final stages of UAT.
Wow.
We were ready to go live in 3 weeks. So what has happened is they went back and did what I told them during that time frame, which, hey, we shouldn't go live with everything. We should go live with functionality. First functionality go live should be, A. Second functionality go live will be B. And the bank was against that. They wanted everything at once. And
Wow.
they found later that was a mistake. And what would happen, you're going to run into this, is that when I would clash with the business, in this case was the customer, they went over my head, and then the managers over me, would side with the bank. And then when we couldn't meet the deadlines, everybody jumps on me, even though I told them we couldn't do it.
Wow.
They didn't want to hear it.
No.
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful, man. It was a very good learning experience in the sense that it was an $8 million project, and had a lot of challenges. And the bank, when I left, the bank was very, very concerned and gave, and they were very appreciative of the work I did. The best compliment I ever got, it was the bank, when the bank said to my company, when Lucio's in Chile, even we are more productive. So, I thanked them for that comment, because what they were saying was that, I was managing everybody, and successfully. And they said that when I was in the office at the bank or the office, when everybody's working together, that everything seemed to have gone more smoothly. So it was all good compliments, but at the end of the day, man, they sucked the life out of me, man.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I just tell these things because I know you're a good PM and you're experienced, but and maybe you already experienced some of the stuff. But I'm telling you, so if you have it and you get to that position, you think things all the way through, all the way around, and not only look at, like you argued with a guy, which was great. Remember, read your pin book. You negotiate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Pero, I'm just messing with you. Pero the key thing there is it's not so black and white of just like you told them, adding more developers. There's an infrastructure in place that that gets impacted. So,
yeah.
Anyway, all right, man.
All right, no, great. Thank you very much, Lucio, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully, I want to. Well, yeah, I need to get a haircut. So, if you want to start early tomorrow, fine. If not, that's fine. We'll talk.
Okay, I mean, let me know tomorrow. I don't think I don't have a dinner or something. So tomorrow we can. I don't see why not. We if you leave early, we can definitely do it earlier.
All right, big boy.
All right.
Good night, man.
Good night. Thank you very much, Lucio. Good night.
Bye, man.